Hi guys, we're going to get started in about 1 minute. We're still missing a few people, but we want to be respectful of time, so we're going to get started right at 6.
Hi everyone, it's Thursday again. See, we zoomed through that week, literally. I just want to welcome you, and I'm so excited to have you all here again with us today. We are going to get started. We're going to be respectful of your time and get this knocked out so we can move on in our training. So thank you for being here, and I'm glad everybody didn't float away after the flooding we had last night. So we'll get started. Here's Ashley.
Welcome everyone. The first thing we want to do tonight is debrief a little bit. You had several pre-work assignments that we know you guys had questions about, so we want to give you the opportunity to discuss those here and also give a little bit of an opportunity for those of you who were in your court observations this week to chat a little bit about that. I know we had some opportunity to talk with you guys about those while we were doing the court, but now that we're all here, we hope you'll share with your fellow trainees what all you learned during court observations. Hopefully it's all positive. I know Peter waited quite a long time. I think he was in there a while, and Amy isn't logged on yet, but she had that same experience, which you'll find is probably true to life. So before we get on the court observations, would anyone like to share some questions or comments they had about the pre-work from your binder from Canvas? Clara has a question, and Clara, let's give Clara a little gentle round of applause because her audio is working tonight. So we finally get to hear her. All right, Clara, unmute yourself. There.
My question is this: after going with, there was a thing in there about there were more colored children in foster care than white children. My neighbor was a social worker that said that the government used to pay more to have a colored child in foster care than they did a white. Is that true?
I don't know if it used to be true, but I know it's not true today. So that is one of the things we hoped you would bring up so that we could have some discussion about that. And we'll probably actually bring it up again right before we finish tonight when we talk about cultural competence and disparity and how children appear in the system. I'm not sure if that used to be true. It would have been many years ago. I worked for the cabinet about 13 years ago, and it was not true then, and it's not true today. I hear some feedback. I don't know where it's coming from. Sorry. But it's not true today. Now, there is a little bit of a pay scale regarding children with increased need. So if a child has some excessive behaviors, a lot of those are sexually reactive behaviors or really violent or aggressive behaviors, then they will, level the kids, and if they reach like a level 4 or level 5, then they can be placed in a medically complex or a higher level home, and those homes do get paid a higher rate than one who doesn't, but that is based on need and not on how good or bad the child is, or how what color their skin is, or how old they are, or anything like that. It's based purely on need. So if a child has a lot of behavior issues, that extra money is to provide extra services for them to meet the higher need. Or if they have a physical disability or a medical need, then that money is there to help provide for that need. There is not currently any pay range differences based on the child's racial makeup or anything of that nature. Now, that might have been true many years ago. I don't know about that. Alondra and I read it today and wish we'd read it earlier so we could do research. but we know that today it's not the case. Any other questions or comments? I'm looking at, I think, Sarah's. I'm not going to call you out, make you talk because you're eating. It might not even be yours. It is yours. But you asked, what are value judgments when we're talking about culture and different kinds of people? And for the purposes of this class, and when we talk about culture and competence, when we talk about value judgments, what we're referring to is placing a higher or lower value on someone else's cultural practices or their behaviors or what they do. So people are different. All people are different. White people are different from other white people. Black people are different from other black people. Women are different from other women. We're all different, and that's great. That's what makes us all wonderful and work well and complement each other when we get together in groups like this. It's when we place a value on those differences that it can become an issue. So it's, recognizing that people are a little different from you is wonderful, because then we get to share our experiences with each other. But when we place value on those differences and start saying one is better or worse than the other, that's where we can get into some trouble. So thank you, Sarah, for asking that. It really sparked some discussion between Alondra and I today when we were talking about it. Any other questions? None right now. Peter, can I put you on the spot? Would you like to share anything about your court observation?
Yeah, sure. First, I did wait a while, but I explained to Susan that I was doing homework for CASA while I was waiting, so it didn't kill me. But I think one of the nicest things about it was that the judge, she specifically asked the child directly how she was doing at the end of the session with the new school year, much less overall. I thought that was really nice to hear because nobody had addressed her prior to that. I know things get overlooked, but it was a little bit surprising that a report from a professional that the lady representing the cabinet had not been given to either attorney, and that made an important decision impossible to make, and therefore held off until the next session.
Peter, I think was this my case? Not mine. Was it? I thought so. So I wanted to.
She didn't email that to her and to the either attorney until that day.
There is some background story, and I want to stand up for the social worker in this one case. Now, I will say that we find it very common that reports do not get turned in until the day of court, or not turned in at all. So it's very common for that to happen. However, on that particular case, what had happened is we were not supposed to have court. We were not on the docket. We actually weren't supposed to have court until the 22nd. But the attorney, the case manager had accidentally put it on the docket. So the social worker didn't know until Monday that it was going to be on Tuesday. And then when we got on for the hearing, the attorneys were talking about it, and we're like, no one's really prepared. We didn't have opportunity to get a lot of the information shared with everybody. Let's postpone it and just go ahead and have it on the 22nd. And one of the attorneys said, I can't be here on the 22nd. Let's go ahead and have the hearing now. So it wasn't supposed to happen. It almost didn't happen. But I don't want, Carrie is that social worker's name. I don't want Carrie to be thrown under the bus for something that wasn't entirely her fault. I also don't want to mislead you and let you think that social workers always have their reports in on time, because that's not accurate either. But they should have them to the court staff, the judge, and to us the Thursday before court takes place is the guidance on that. So you are absolutely right that it did throw things off a little bit. There was some discrepancy about the interpretation of the report as well, because she had some information from a therapist in it. So if that had been in earlier, I think some better decisions would have been made too. But it wasn't entirely the social worker's fault this time. What other?
No, I logged in after people were chatting, but they were also waiting for both parents to virtually arrive. And there was discussion that, I didn't realize that they hadn't, I knew there was a later court date scheduled for the 22nd, but I thought that was over something entirely else, because then they said that they were just going to turn today's into a review as opposed to what they had planned for the 22nd.
Yes, they had planned a review for the 22nd, and then they talked about doing something during that hearing called a show cause. Do you remember that? I think one of the attorneys said it's time for a show cause on this case. If you're not familiar with the court system, show cause is something that comes up, and that happens when someone involved in the case, usually the parents, are not doing what they've been ordered to do, and they have to come before the court and demonstrate that they've done it, or a really, really, really good reason why they didn't do it. Because what happens from there is they end up in jail. So the show cause in this case, mom has not been doing therapy and is substance using.
Yeah, and just in casual discussion, it wasn't only mom. They actually said neither parent is really making progress of any kind.
No. And the child has been in care about 15 months now.
Yep.
So thank you, Peter, for sharing that. I know Amy was also in court, and she had a very similar experience to Peter's, in that she waited for a very long time before she was able to hear any court. We also had some technical difficulties with her and Skype that it took us a little bit to get worked out, but she is not with us yet this evening. So I think, Susan, did someone else participate in court? I thought we had 3 people this week.
Yes, Pooja also.
Yeah.
Yay, Pooja, tell us about your experience.
Mine was actually pretty sweet and short. I always had this misconception of oh, no one was always the children were just seen as a number. But this time I feel or just being in court, everyone was very thoughtful of the child, just making sure that how the child was doing, how they would integrate back into their home lives with their mom. And mother was also progressing pretty well. So it was nice to see a positive outcome, and just having the child visit them, or having the child have more visitations, overnight visitations with the mother.
That's wonderful, Pooja. I think Susan would agree that that is one of our judges' strengths, is that she can be very attentive to the children. She'll make sure that they have an opportunity to speak if they're there. She'll ask about them. She remembers minute details about them, typically, if they've been in court before, and she makes sure to give time and attention to each case when it comes before her. That's one of the reasons that we sometimes run a little bit long, but I think that I would definitely see that as a strength.
Sarah was also on, and hers may be a little different.
Uh-oh, Sarah, are you done eating? Are you ready to share now?
I'm finished eating. Sorry, guys.
Wander's off the screen because she was doing court and eating. So
Okay, good. Glad I'm not alone.
no, not at all.
Yes. My court experience, I waited for probably an hour to an hour and 15 minutes before it started. And that's what I expected. That was totally I understand, that they've got other cases. Like I said, I expected it. But then the actual court experience, I had to text Susan afterward because I was like, is this how they all are? Because it was wild. There was some definite hostility like between the attorneys, for the parents and the fictive kin. But then the thing that really got me was that nobody ever even mentioned the kids until Susan mentioned the kids. The judge asked, like, can we hear from the CASA? And that was the first time they were ever mentioned. And that just kind of blew me away.
Susan was
And I will tell you, Sarah, on that case, there is an actual advocate that works that case. However, she was not able to be at that hearing. She works during the day. So she normally would take off, but she wasn't able to get off. So she stays in contact with that family really well. The children have all gotten to know her really well. They trust her and talk to her. So that's why I didn't go into a lot of detail outside of the overall justice. The children are thriving and doing great where they're at. And I wanted everyone to know that, especially after the way that hearing kind of, the hostility did get a little crazy there for a minute. And Sarah, just to follow up with you, I'm sure you were aware when that left, I'm sure you probably left thinking that they were not going to let them have their face-to-face visit. And they did. They had a face-to-face visit yesterday afternoon, and it was very contested. The cabinet worker was very upset about it, did not want it to happen. And I totally understand his point. Even I think Dad's attorney wasn't okay with that visit happening until some mental health assessments were returned. But the social worker's superiors, he went back and had to clear that, and they said, no, we want it to happen. So he met at a park with them, and they did a face-to-face, and it didn't get too crazy. He was extremely nervous about it. And there were some words that were probably shouldn't have been said, but it did happen, just so you know what the follow-up on that.
And so the dad, he was present too?
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
That's what I mean. And I don't think Dad's attorney was even in agreement with that. He didn't want Dad having the face-to-face. And the cabinet it has the authority to determine those visits, and the judge left it at the discretion of the cabinet. And you saw the social worker on, but the social worker always has to go back and talk to his supervisor. And that supervisor made the call that since they had made such a long trip, this family, for those who aren't aware, had come all the way from Connecticut, the mother and father. However, they've not made any of their virtual visits, which are offered every week. So they haven't had any visits, and they came all the way in for a virtual court hearing, which no one could understand why they made that trip. But once they got here, then they had a fit that they wanted a face-to-face. But they're coming from out of state during COVID. Dad has lots of anger issues, so it was a heated hearing. So I told Sarah, they're not all like that, Sarah, but there are some.
They're not all like that, but while I'm sure it was interesting to watch, I'm glad you got to experience it, Sarah, and I'm glad you shared that with us too, because I think it's very important for us to say a little reminder here and let you guys know that the attorneys and the social worker in every case are fulfilling the role and the commitment that they have made to the court process. So when they are arguing with each other, or they're arguing with us, or sometimes arguing with the judge, they're doing that because they were fulfilling their commitment to their client. So we don't ever want you guys to take that personally, or to feel like these attorneys hate each other. Like they're probably going to get in a fist fight in the hallway when this is over. That's very, very rarely the case. I've never seen it happen. And really, they're just committed to their clients and committed to really representing their client well, which is also the role that we play. We are committed to advocating for our child and committed to being a voice for that child as well. So we want to do a little reminder that it's not personal. They're not intending to, you know, be at each other's throats necessarily in real life. They're not normally angry with each other. It's just that they're very passionate and very committed to representing their clients really well. Usually they go out for drinks afterwards.
I was just about to jump in and say, even though you witnessed that, Sarah, I'm sure the moment it was over, they are perfectly fine. And a lot of times the social worker will be that way. They'll be fighting for their cause. We'll be fighting for our cause. The attorneys will. But for everyone on here, just to keep that in mind, that don't ever let that get you to the point where you have hard feelings toward them, because we do all have to have a really good working relationship with everyone. So try to maintain that level of friendship with all of your collaterals that you're working with. But yes, you have a certain cause. You're there to represent just those children. That attorney was there to represent just Dad. And a lot of times they'll walk straight out of there. If we were in person, they'll walk straight out and say, I know he did it, but I'm paid to represent him. so that's just the nature of the game. So.
All right, thank you guys so much for sharing about court. We look forward to some more of you guys participating in those court observations next week and continuing to share your experiences with us. We all learn from each other as we go through this process and share the things that we see. Last week we didn't do any breakout rooms, and we did that intentionally because you guys had said that you felt like maybe doing those several short breakout rooms took away from our time together as a whole. So we didn't do any last week, but we brought them back, just one for tonight. But we felt like it was very critical to the activity that we're going to be doing. So I am going to ask Rosemary to join us to introduce this activity.
Hi guys, it's me again. This is one of my favorite activities. It is Shannon's story that you will find in your, oh hang on, sorry, my phone is ringing. Sorry about that. That you will find in your binder, page 14 through page 16. And so if you've have they read Shannon's story? Was that part of pre-work?
No,
okay.
They are going to be looking at it.
Okay, so if you can go to page 14 in your binder, it is called Shannon's story. And I feel like that it's really an important component of being a CASA, because it deals a little bit with a child that is an infant, and that is really a unique experience for CASA, because when you have a baby that is the victim, then you often have to build a relationship with the offending parent in order to try to work toward what the cabinet and the state works, their idea of permanency and reunification with the parent, if at all possible. So that's kind of always in the background of what the court is doing, what the judge's decisions are, what the attorneys especially for the offending parent is trying, and the social worker, that's how they set their case plan, is what wraparound services can we provide to this family so that we can reunify them and hopefully not see them back in the court again. So as you look at this story, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Shannon. Shannon is about a 1-year-old baby girl, and her mom's name is Katerina? Would you say, or Katrina?
Katerina.
Katerina. Okay, so when you go into your breakout rooms, you're each going to get to meet Shannon and her mom, Katerina, and her foster family, Maria and Nathan. So you will have a facilitator. I mean, the CASA supervisors are going to be in your breakout room, but we really want one of you to step up and kind of be the facilitator for this, be the note taker, and come back and kind of report on what your group found. So kind of think about that before you go into your breakout room. So Katerina has had 4 children. So we're not really sure how old Katerina is, but just think about that. She's had 4 children, 3 of which have already been removed from her because of her addiction problem. So 2 of them are, they're half siblings of Shannon, and they are in foster care or with out of state. The mom really doesn't have any communication with them. The other is a little boy who lives nearby with his bio father, and he spends weekends with Katerina. So I don't know what age, they don't really talk about the ages of these children, but they are older than Shannon. So Shannon's first memory, if you think about that, at what age do children can they recall memories? Is around the age 3 or 4, if you think back when you were little, when you start remembering things. So if you think about that, she was removed from Katerina when she was about 1 year old. So she was placed with Nathan and Marie. They're a couple with no children, and they didn't have any relationship with Katerina. They are a foster family. But one of the things that they wanted to do, I think I could tell from reading this, is they really wanted to help build a relationship with Katerina so that she could keep building her relationship with Shannon while she was getting help. So they did everything they could to wrap around services for her. They brought in their church to help her get a home, and they really supported her and even took her on vacation with them when they thought that they were really going to help her build a relationship and get Shannon back in a stable environment. So it is not uncommon for someone with an addiction problem to have a relapse. I'm sure that you know that. And that is what happened to Katerina. So after she got Shannon back in her care, she relapsed and the baby was removed again. This time when she called Nathan and Marie to help her out, they were a little more reluctant. They were probably frustrated with her and disappointed with her and really worried about the safety of the baby. So when you think about that, Shannon went back with mom after she was almost 2.5 years old. So her really stable family, what she knew as her parents, were her foster parents. If you think about that, her stability was really from her foster parents. So then they went back and they tried to help her get her back. And then by the time she was 3, she was removed again. And so think of the trauma that the child is going through. And that's really what CASA's focus is. We hate it for Katerina. We don't know what her story is. We don't know what kind of child abuse or trauma that she went through herself or what caused some of her addiction problems. But we have to think as a CASA that we are very child focused and with a trauma lens on what kind of services can we recommend? What is the best interest of the baby and her? So as you go through the story, and it's a little bit of a lengthy thing if you think about that, but by the time she is almost 5 years old, there's when the court is finally saying, okay, well, it's enough. We want to get this kid in a stable environment. And Maria and Nathan actually hire an attorney and they want to adopt her. So they want the court to terminate Katerina's parental rights. Now, during this time, Katerina is trying to get her stuff together. She's trying to be stable. She has some relationship with the baby. So now this is the dilemma. What do we as a CASA think about? What do we recommend to the court in the best interest of the child? Because remember, as Ashley described earlier, the mom's attorney and the dad's attorney are going to fight for getting her back with Katerina. The foster family who wants to be the adoptive family, their attorney is going to try to convince the court that the best thing for Shannon is to be with them and to be adopted by them. So now we get to get our opinion about that. So when you break out in your room, I want you to meet Shannon, but I also want you to think about the rest of today's activities are going to be around some bit of racial bias, some kind of implicit bias, some things that we have to pre-assume things. What does Shannon look like? What does Katerina look like? What do Nathan and Maria look like? So these are some of the dilemmas that you're going to experience as you go into your breakout room and have a discussion about. So there are some discussion questions at the end of this, things that you could consider. And Ashley's going to break you out now, and then you can get a little bit of time. How long are they going to be in?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Have fun and get a good discussion going. Thank you, guys.
Was 10 minutes enough?
Hey, got disconnected from my group.
Oh no.
Can you hear me, Ashley?
Yeah.
I was in the group and I was having technical issues and then it just dropped me.
Maybe they didn't like what you had to say and
That's
they
okay.
kicked you out.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Kathy, sorry we lost you.
That's okay. I knew I was having technical issues and I was trying to figure it out and but I can hear you now.
We're glad you're here. We're glad you made it back to the large group, even if you missed a little bit. All right, we're going to jump right into discussing this. Hopefully, we had a better experience in the breakout rooms because we had a few more minutes to really dive in. I want to start tonight with Susan's group. We asked you guys to designate a speaker, but of course, I don't know who that was. So, Susan, tell us a little bit about your group, and we'll invite that person to go ahead.
My group consisted of Romaine, Peter, and Clara, and Romaine graciously agreed to speak for our group. So I'll let her discuss. Our group we had the scenario of the couple that was fostering, the older couple, and whether or not we felt like the older couple should have the right to move forward with the termination and to proceed with adoption.
Okay.
I'll let Romaine speak.
All right, Romaine, tell us.
Okay. So as a group, we thought that the best thing for the child in the situation was for the couple to go forward with the termination of the parental rights, since mom seems to have such a struggle being able to stay clean, and the child is bouncing back and forth between mom and the adopted couple, and it had gone on for several years, plus she had lost other children in the past. So we decided that the best thing for the child in that situation was for her to stay with the couple.
All right, Romaine, thank you for sharing. Terry, who in your group would like to share whether they agreed with Romaine and Susan and their group, or if they had some disagreement?
I think Andrea was going to speak for us. Was that correct?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that our group really decided that we didn't have enough information to really make a really sound decision. But with what information that we were given, we felt that maybe Shannon should stay with her mom because mom is following the case plan and that she's trying. And she's maintained gainful employment. She's maintained her home. She's completed treatment. And that sobriety is, that relapse is expected. And so I think that was kind of our group's thoughts, that maybe Shannon should stay with the mom, especially if she's established an attachment to mom and has a good relationship with her. And really it's about, I think our group kind of decided it's really, we would have to talk to Shannon and see what she really, really wanted and and where she felt most comfortable. If she felt comfortable with the family, or felt more comfortable with mom.
Those are some great thoughts too. I love that your groups didn't agree. And I think that that's really important because that happens a lot. Susan's chuckling a little bit. And I think we have that in the office too. We'll talk about a case and we'll all, even as professionals, go back and forth a little bit and say, we don't have enough information, or the couple is older. Does that play a factor? And we do discuss these things. So those are also things that get discussed during like the pre-trial conference or at court when we're making really difficult decisions. So I love, Andrea, that you and Terry, that your group wanted more information, because very often we do need more information to be able to make these difficult decisions. Okay, Robin, how does your group factor in? What would you guys add to the discussion on Shannon?
If Amy wants to be our spokesperson.
Okay. You're muted, Amy.
We had a discussion that was some of what you've already mentioned. We need some more information before we can go forward. It looks to me in reading this that she relapsed twice, but for 15 months she's maintained sobriety. It's not an easy decision. This is a time when it's a good thing to be a CASA and not a judge.
Right. Amen to that.
You know, do Nathan and Marie have other children? How old is Shannon? How old is Katerina right now? You know, there was discussion about, well, she has 3 other kids that she doesn't have anymore. How do we know she can take care of this one? I'd say 2 of the folks in our group kind of feel like they should proceed with the adoption. I don't know if the rest of us really declared. Did I get anything, guys?
We're not going to force a vote tonight. But
sorry.
Go ahead, Sha. Who's gonna add something?
But after like Amy expressed her input and her viewpoints, because at first I expressed mine, but then she came up with a wonderful devil's advocate perspective. Well, it wasn't devil's advocate, but she made a joke calling it that. But when she started describing like those certain aspects of the case, then she started to convince me more away from TPR and to give the mom a second chance. So I'm honestly on the fence. Just like what she said, it's a good thing to be a CASA at this point than a judge, because there's so many factors that come into play. So
there are, and as CASAs, we do often have to make really difficult decisions, and like several of you have mentioned now, we have to sometimes do that without as much information as we would like to have. I'm going to make a shameless plug for our book club now. Terry leads the CASA book club, and we just finished the book Ruby, and we had our book club meeting on Monday night, and we had a wonderful discussion. And part of that discussion was that we just did not have enough information about many of our cases. And in the book, we found out tons of information, and when we tried to apply that to how we would respond to a CASA case, we were all kind of in agreement that we probably wouldn't have that information. We wouldn't have that depth of background information on the parent or maybe even on the child. So it's really critical and really important that you guys recognize that there's so much more information that would be useful in this case. And that you also know that it's always okay to ask questions. You can ask questions. You can go to mom's attorney, ask Nathan and Maria, ask Shannon. Maybe Shannon's in therapy. Maybe her therapist would be able to weigh in. So it's great that you guys recognize that there's more that we would want to know before we make a recommendation or really add our ideas to a really difficult and lifelong conversation and decision about this case. A big part of this case is that Shannon has been in some really difficult situations in her life. One of those is substance abuse, and we're going to talk a little bit about substance abuse. But as we discuss Shannon and Katerina and the things that they've been through, we also want to remember this spent activity that we did and that I hope most of you did. I know I did when we were doing our pre-work. So I'm going to invite Alondra up here to discuss both substance abuse and the spent activity with you guys.
Hi guys. So right now is the first time I'm able to say hi. I've been busy with, like Ashley was saying, court, and then I was eating supper, so just been busy. And court was like, what, 4 hours behind, so long day. Okay, so the spent activity. When we were combining or putting this binder together, we were trying to figure out a way on how to best what should I say, how to best present that to our advocates. And I found that awesome spent activity on the web, and I shared it with Ashley and at the time Kelsey, and they agreed that it was very enlightening. And you were able to put yourself and ourselves in that poverty level situation. So does anybody want to talk about how their spent journey went?
I went broke pretty quick.
So how many days did you make it?
I don't even remember, but it was just like going to the grocery and just doing that kind of stuff. I was amazed, and I was trying to pick healthy, but healthy stuff is more expensive. And so I went through it pretty quick.
Yeah. I think for mine, I went to day 30, but that was only because I hit somebody and I chose the option to run. And I'm going to explain. I'm going to explain why. I think I had $16 left. Okay. And I had a son or a child, and I was not going to get paid. I was running out of groceries, and I would not get paid again for another week. Or maybe actually I was going to get paid the next day or something like that. But I had to pay that person that I hit $515 or something. So my paycheck would have been gone already. So I'm like, I think my child needs food, so I'm going to run.
Yeah, well, mine was I hit somebody and then I paid them, and then so I was out within a few days.
Yeah. But does anybody else want to share? Oh, Peter, I think you had unmute yourself.
I made it to day 15. I thought I was doing good, but the raise in rent and then when the kid broke my window, and that was it. It just, I thought I was doing pretty good, and then that was it.
Yeah. What about you, Sarah? I know that you raised your hand.
Yeah, so I made it to day 30 as well. And I was feeling really confident that I was going to make it the entire way. But then, same thing, you know, I hit a car. I did choose to pay the damages, but like it it completely depleted, you know, what money I had saved. But I felt so bad. Like, I'm still haunted by this one question. It was like, your mother needs crucial medicine. It's going to cost $100. What do you do? And I said, no. I had to tell my mom. I was like, I feel so bad that I did this.
I did the same thing. I told my mom, no, I'm not. Does anybody else want to share? Amy.
I think Amy wanted to.
I had $136 left at the end of the month,
Wow.
but my kids probably thought I was a real bitch.
So you didn't allow them to do any extra things?
I allowed them to do I think one extra thing, but sometimes, and I think we got a birthday gift and the kid got to go to that party, but
they didn't get tutoring though, did they?
not if it was paid for, they didn't. Priorities, yeah. Birthday parties are more important.
I think I had one that said $10. There was my son or my kid received a $10 in a card. Do you give it to them or do you keep it? I did choose to give it to him because at that point $10 wasn't going to make much of a difference. But who else? Clara, what about you?
No, I feel pretty bad because I only made it 6 days.
Oh man, what hardships did you come across?
Car insurance. Oh man.
Yeah. Well, and I felt when I was doing this activity, I did try to put myself in the situation that I was given, which is why I was actually doing it right next to Ashley. And she said, what are you going to do when I hit that car? I said, what are you going to do? And I talked to her about it. I was like, I have to put food on the table. It's either run or let my child starve or lose ribs or, you know, and that brought a very big perspective to me. Because a lot of people live in poverty and they have to make these real life decisions. And we have to make sure that we are very aware and very, what's the word? Sympathize with them on those decisions that they make. And it ties into like the minimum level of care as well. As long as they're providing that, the child is safe, then staying with that parent or caregiver is most likely the appropriate place for the child to be. And not everybody has the extra stuff that we have. So, you know, just making sure that we are aware of that and that we use compassion. All right. I hope everybody enjoyed that sprint activity. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot when I do it. Okay, so we are going to get started. And our next activity, our next topic, sorry, I lost my points here. Do you know where the agenda went? Maybe substance abuse. All right. So I want to do a activity like all of us together in this gallery, and I want to talk about brainstorm a little bit about possible effects of substance abuse on parenting. And Ashley is going to do the whiteboard effect on the Zoom call, and I want everybody just to kind of shoot out at me how can substance abuse affect parenting? And then she'll type it on the screen for us.
It might help you guys to think about Shannon and Katarina. Substance abuse was such a big factor for them. Thinking about substance abuse and how it applied to Katarina's parenting.
Amy, I know you unmuted.
You weren't supposed to see that. Sometimes when a person's addiction is active, there is physical abuse or sexual abuse, certainly emotional abuse, things that the parent would never think of doing if they were sober.
Correct. Mm-hmm. What else can we add to that?
I would think, I know people that I have known that have suffered with alcohol abuse would do things that they normally wouldn't do, like drinking and driving with their child in the car. So putting their child at risk.
That's true, putting their child at risk. And that can be in many different ways as well. So putting your child at risk could be leaving your child in an apartment building for you to go pay for drugs, or become over intoxicated to where you completely black out for multiple hours at a time, and you leave that infant, toddler, young child to care for itself if they're able to. So putting the child at risk there's many different versions or many different ways or things that fall under that. Heather, what about you?
I think just a lack of someone that is this is a personal experience. I don't know if I can share that. I have a younger sister that's been a long-term drug addict and she's in recovery now, but just lack of care, even though it was her kids, not caring about their feelings because the drug is more important. Like this one instance, my mom went to pick her up from this house with her 5-year-old son in the back seat, and he wanted to get her fake flowers when he saw her because he hadn't seen her for weeks. And she was mad she had to leave this house, and so he reached up between the seats to hand them, and she didn't even look at him. She just yanked them out of his hand and threw them in the floorboard. And my nephew looked at my mom and said, "Why is mommy so mad?" And she just that's her child, but zero, I guess the drugs, just zero feelings.
Mm-hmm. Ashley,
I don't know how to say that any other way. Shortened.
It's the number priority.
I do want to let you guys know that everything that is shared in our training is to remain confidential. This is a safe place for everybody to share what they are willing to share. So please feel free to share if you would like to. And I just wanted to reassure you guys on that. Back to what you were saying, Heather, Ashley put on the white screen, the drug is more important. Mm-hmm. So I think that really captures what you're trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like even the financial aspect of it. Like I know I have a niece that she, had surgery and ended up addicted to painkillers and totally wiped out the kids' college savings fund.
Yes.
Because she ended up getting to where she was buying it on the street. And, you know, and you would, I mean, it just goes to show that addiction it affects everyone. I mean, it affects anyone. And it just amazes because you would never think that this person would ever do that.
Right, right. Peter, what about you?
The one thing you had mentioned it, going to buy drugs, and but one thing that always has to be kept in mind, which certainly couldn't be necessarily kept track of, but the people that the child is exposed to because of the parents' using environment, which becomes the child's using environment.
That's right. These are all great things, great topics, guys. Want to add anything else?
I was just thinking that there would probably be like a delayed response time to the child's needs. Maybe it's past due for them to be fed or to have a change of a diaper, something basic like that.
Right. Ashley's coming up here.
I want to say just one thought that I think we've touched on both sides of it, and we've said that the drug is more important than the child, or they don't seem to care about the child or anything else. But also, I think it was Kathy that shared that her niece became addicted after a surgery and something that was totally legitimate. And so something that came up several times in the responses is that it's difficult when someone makes the choice to be a drug addict and that they're choosing drugs over their child or over their family. And this is something that a lot of people have really strong feelings about, but I just wanted to share with you guys how I think about that and how we might be more empathetic towards someone who uses. And so because my family, not my immediate family, but my family has also been touched by substance abuse, and we have lost someone close to us to substance abuse, it's been very difficult for us to process that and how she might have chosen her drugs every time. But what we tried to talk about and try to remember is that she chose it the first time. She chose alcohol the first time, but we've also chosen alcohol at times too. And then she chose something different the next time. And by the time she was 100 choices in, it wasn't a choice anymore, and she couldn't turn back. And by the time she was in it, she knew she was in it, but there was nothing she could do. She didn't realize it before that time. So while it certainly is a choice, when Alondra and I were talking about it, I said Diet Dr. Pepper is a choice too, and I make it every day, even though I know it's making me fat, and I know it's bad for me, and it has too much fake sugar and all that. I choose it every single day, even though I know it's a bad choice. Now, it doesn't affect my kids like alcohol might, or how cocaine or meth might, but it certainly is bad for my health, and it's difficult for me to make a different choice now that I've started. So I just wanted to add that because we kind of heard both sides of that, and I did want to address something that had been posted in the pre-work. So that's how we like to think about it, at least in my family.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ashley. I wanted to, if nobody else has anything else they're wanting to add, I wanted to finish adding by saying that exposure for two parents having alcohol and drug abuse makes that more likely for the child to also experience that as they get older and as they grow. So that's another way that they can harm their children. So thank you so much for being so cooperative and participating. It makes it for such a better discussion and interaction. I love it. I love our group. Ashley and I talk about it all the time. You guys are amazing, like amazing.
Pooja raised her hand.
Pooja, did you have something to add?
I was just gonna say, with adding on to like the getting addicted to like medications, some people are also like just genetically predisposed to like having that addiction factor like in their genes, so it's just hard to battle that.
You're right. You're right. Thank you for sharing that. All right. I think we are moving on. To a 15-minute brain break.
Not 15 minutes.
15
Don't get
seconds. I'm
excited.
sorry, 15 seconds.
Let me get my screen sharing fixed, worked out. And we are going to take a 15-second brain break.
15 seconds.
15 seconds. Alondra,
I
don't
know.
get
I'm
excited.
trying to give you guys more time. So get up, go to the bathroom, stretch,
Don't go to
yoga.
the bathroom. It'll take you longer than 15 seconds.
Call downtown Park Forest staff.
And we're back. All right. We are moving on to domestic violence. I want to make sure that as we're moving on to heavier topics, I want to bring up the feelings thermometer, make sure that that is handy and you are able to refer that as you need it and as we move on to topics later today. So we are doing activity 4D, which is located on page 17 of your binder. So everybody watched, did they watch the video while we stayed for pre-work, right? Thumbs up.
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so I want to talk about domestic violence. It's important to be aware that domestic violence exists and families you encounter. So if you suspect domestic violence, is encountering them, make sure the victim has several opportunities to talk to you alone, individually, and make sure their perpetrator or the person you suspect as a perpetrator is not there. That way they have more courage, I believe, to be able to open up with you or at least give you those hints of what's going on. Some conspiracies of silence, I'm sorry. So look for typical characteristics in these types of conversations or types of visual environments when you go and talk to families. So the victim may seem angry or frustrated. The batterer often seems more truthful. They're more willing to sway you. They look like they have everything under control. You're also able to see that they have power a little bit, and it may be in the way that they talk to their to the victim and the way that they portray themselves when they are in that same environment. So there is a recruiting cycle of family tension followed by the batterer's explosion, and then sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so does anybody have any questions when they watched the video while we stayed? What stood out to you?
I was always amazed, you know, because that is the most common question everybody asks, why do you stay?
Mm-hmm.
And I never really thought of it when watching that video that people take that wrong. And knowing someone who's been in that situation, then went back, then came out, then went back.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing in that situation, it had to be her decision to leave, whereas we were removing her from the situation, and then she would just continue to go back.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I never really thought about that question, you know, that how sometimes they would take that offensively that you would ask that question.
That's true. It's statistically, it's a hard word for me to say. Statistically, yeah. A woman or a victim leaves the household of their perpetrator 7 times before they fully commit to leave for good. So, like you said, they do leave several times and come back, several times and come back. And I believe each time they leave, they become a little more braver or have that extra courage to want to leave for good. But like I said, it does take them 7 times to leave before they're saying, okay, no more.
Probably Peter wanted to add something.
Peter, yes, go ahead.
There were things brought up. I thought it was really great that it was included aspects of control that that their husband or partner had beyond threats that you may never even take into consideration. Why wouldn't you just, once again, why wouldn't they just leave? But when they discuss them and those aspects of control, that from the outside, someone might not ever even think of those things. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Heather, what about you?
I'm not sure that I've watched this yet. I still think I have 3 or 4 more things to do on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we saw that your hand was up. We weren't just.
Oh.
Is that an accident? I'm so sorry.
I don't know. Show it on my end, but
no, you're completely fine. So children and families that experience domestic violence in their home are more likely to show those characteristics in their homes as they grow older. So when they become fathers, when they become mothers, they're more susceptible to demonstrate those same characteristics. So as the saying goes, you will demonstrate, you will be what you were when you grow up, or what you went through when you grow up. And to some extent that is true, which is why it's very important for CASAs to be able to talk to children that do experience domestic violence, be able to have them open up to you, give them those protective factors, give them that resilience, allow them to grow and to know that that is not, what they have to do, or that is not the appropriate or the best way to, grow and be treated ultimately. I think, Ashley, are you coming up? No? Okay, I thought Ashley was coming up here. So we just want to make sure that we are there for the child. We get them to open up with us. We get them to allow them to have those extra resources that they need. So I want to move on to what can a CASA volunteer do for children that do experience domestic violence? I think that's another one of our slides, is it? So we want to make sure that we're both knowledgeable and concerned about domestic violence. So children from violent homes are at a higher risk for abuse than other children. We want to make sure that domestic violence is a single major precursor to child abuse and neglect in precursor to child abuse and neglect fatalities in the U.S. So those children that experience domestic violence in the home are more likely to suffer those fatalities due to child abuse and neglect. And does everybody understand why that is? That is probably due to parents arguing and the child maybe wanting to get involved in that, or one parent taking it out on the child as well. Or in some cases of domestic violence, they may use the child as a source of, what's the word I'm looking for? As a source of, as a pawn for that victim. The perpetrator may take the child to hold on to the victim to not allow the victim to leave. So it's very hard for children that live in a home like that. So we want to take into account the history and severity of the family violence when making any recommendations for placement of the children. Many professionals in the field of domestic violence believe that you cannot protect the child unless you also protect the primary nurturer victim, usually a mother. as a part of that perspective, they advocate for placement of the child with the mother regardless of other factors. Saying to do otherwise further victimizes the mother to the hands of the system. So I wanted to talk about one of my cases that I have. I have a case which is, it started out as a domestic violence case. Mom called the police department and they came and removed her child. So mom called the police department due to domestic violence, and she had no idea that when she called, they were going to remove this child. So keep in mind that this family is not an English speaking family as well. So that is an extra hardship that they have as well. So mom was, the children were ripped away from mom. So that's traumatizing to the child to begin with anyways. And mom was sent to Oasis. Oasis had a policy due to COVID that she was not allowed to see her children for 2 weeks due to having to be quarantined. So we had to work with mom and, you know, explain to her what the situation was. And our goal at that time was to place the children back with mom. We want to make sure we place the children with the caregiver or with their parental parent when at all possible and when it is safe and appropriate for the child. You know, the mother was not the one being in question in this scenario, but the child was still taken away from her. So at that time, she was willing to do what she had said she was going to do. You know, the court asked her to go through domestic violence classes and become more aware of that. I had to sit down with her and explain to her that even though she was not the perpetrator in this case, it still affected her children. I had to sit down and tell her of ways that domestic violence affected those children. And it was hard for her to hear that. Now that case did not go the way I planned, but that's another story. All right. And so we want to also determine the best interest of the child. So by the end, you must make recommendations based solely on the best interest of the child. So that means whether you believe that the child is safe with that parent, or if there are factors that does not make the child safe, that it does not make it safe to return the child to their parental parents. All right, long breath. Let's take a break, right? 5-minute break, 5-minute break. Yes. So now we can get up, go to the bathroom, grab a quick snack, anything. And I will see you in 5 minutes. Fastest 5 minutes ever, right? Okay. For the purpose of time, we are going to go ahead and get started. We are going to move on to page 24, the challenges you may face. So Ashley is going to share the PowerPoint with us. So these are some challenges that you may face as a CASA volunteer. And some of them may be, you may be assigned to a case that you would find difficult to work with or find difficult to interact with. Other is mental illness, substance abuse, domestic violence, and other issues that may put child at risk for abuse or neglect. We all have biases based on our own values, so we have to make sure that we're very aware of that and we keep those for like purposes in check, and we are like always there for the child. And then recognize your own bias and learn to set them aside and advocate for the child's best interest. Right now, we are going to move on to our activity, and I want you guys to find your agree and disagree cards in your folder, in your envelope. I'm so sorry. If you do not have those, just put on your whiteboard, put agree on one side and put disagree, and then just flip it or cover one of them while you show us one. And then hold them up for me when you have them. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Kathy. Ashley, would you make this green? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Way to jump it.
I'm sorry. I want to see as many people as we can. Yay, thanks guys. Thanks so much. Okay, let's get started. All right. So I believe the judicial system is unfair to people of color. Agree or disagree? Oh, one disagree. Okay, agree, disagree, 2, 3. All right. Let's talk about that. Why did somebody choose agree and why did somebody choose disagree? Amy?
I chose agree because I think you can look at any day in any courtroom in the country and see that there are more people of color that are arrested, more people of color are incarcerated. I think statistics show that for a crime committed by a Black man, he gets a much longer sentence than a crime committed, the same crime committed by a white man.
Okay. Okay. What about you, Andrea? I saw that you picked disagree.
Okay, so this is like a hot topic lately, and recently too, just in some of the other organizations that I'm a part of. I am going to say this. I picked disagree because where we live in our town, I do not believe that is true for our law enforcement in our judicial system. It may be true in other places, but in Davis County, I do not believe that is true. And I believe that the people that I work with, I know in law enforcement, in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and in the the DA's office, they very, very much try to be fair. Do I think that that is a culture here in Owensboro? Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. I was born and raised here. I haven't lived here my entire adulthood, but that is a culture here. Yes, I do think that there is some bias there, but I don't believe that of the judicial system. So that's not what that's my 2 cents in that.
Thanks guys for sharing. Let's move on to our second one. I believe a child should be able to choose their own gender or sexuality. All right. Amy's either or, I don't know. Amy, you have to pick one. Agree or disagree? Okay. Sarah, what did you pick?
I picked agree, and this is a topic that I'm not completely well versed in, so I don't want to go into it a whole lot, but all I'll say is that if my son told me when he was 5, 10, 15, 20, however old he is, that he's actually a female, I would believe him and I would not love him any less. So that's how I base that.
Okay. Kathy, what about you? I saw that you had disagree.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I do feel pretty strongly about that. I think that first off, children are that, they're children, and I think they are very young to be able to make that kind of decision. And secondly, as a person of faith, I think God makes you male or female, and that's just where I stand on it. I just think that God made us who we are, and so that's probably people I'm sure disagree with that, but that's just how I feel.
Thank you both for sharing. I'm going to share logistics information and not in response to either of these things. One of my coworkers asked if we could share the gallery view, and I'm going to tell you guys how to do that on your screens so you can see both the question that we have on your screen as well as everyone else's faces and their answers, so you can see where you stand amongst the crowd. So if you can't see everyone and you just see like 3 or 4 people on the side, you can click on the gallery at the top of that panel. There will be like 1 bar or 2 bars and then 6 or something. So click on the gallery, and when you do that, a little bar should pop up in between the screen that I have shared with you and that gallery, and you can slide that over to make our screen that we're sharing with you much smaller, and that will pop everybody else out into the gallery so you can see more faces. If you have any questions about that, you can raise them or pop them in the chat box and I'll try to answer them, but that way Heather has a question already. Yes.
I have no idea. Where is this at?
So are you on a phone or on a computer?
An iPad.
Okay, it should still work similar. You won't be able to see quite as many people, but there's probably the screen that I have shared. I believe a child should be able to choose their own gender and sexuality, and then a couple of pictures, maybe like 1 or 2 pictures on the side. You might not be able to do it on iPhone. You might be only able to see that screen. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
Anybody else? Did it work? Maybe you don't even care to see everybody else's answers. We'll let you know. If you're the outlier, we'll say, Heather, you're the only one that picked disagree. Go ahead and share. All right, we'll move on to the next one.
All right. Okay, I believe interracial adoption is wrong. Hey, I feel like everybody's on the same stand about that. Sandy, do you want to say why you chose that? No? Yes? Awesome.
It doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter what color or where they're from. They still need to be adopted, no matter what.
Right.
I don't think it's right for them having different say.
Did Heather and Romaine vote and I didn't see it, or are they reserving their answer on this one?
I think everybody chose disagree on this one.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Let's move on. I believe addiction is a choice. Kathy. Amy. All right. Pooja, what do you disagree?
Like I said before, sometimes it is like it's a biological factor that like you just carry, and in like the most spontaneous ways, like it'll just be activated, and you can't really like at those times with the studies. I mean, sometimes it is a choice. I do agree with that, but like from research, from a scientific perspective at least, like you really can't do anything about it besides fight it. But yeah.
Amy has something to say.
I do. I think it's a choice, even if you're genetically predisposed. If you're aware of that genetic predisposition, you can choose to drink or not drink. And if you choose to drink and then you become addicted, it's because of your choice. Now, if you're in a hospital and you're given pain medication and you're in the hospital for a long time and you leave the hospital addicted, I would say in that instance, it wasn't a choice.
Okay, does anybody have anything to add? Yes, Heather?
I guess I feel strongly about this because of my own family's experience, and I guess I've given the same example to my sister before when she's been on a clean moment of say 6 months, and then she goes out and does it again, and I'm like, you could choose right now, don't go back out on the streets or stay here with your kids. If you get up and you go to the streets after being 6 months clean, you are choosing that over your kids. That's just my opinion. I mean, I know everybody has different feelings about it, but that's just what it feels like. I can't speak from personal experience, but that to me feels like a choice. Especially when you've had your kids taken away and not been a part of their lives, and then you get them back briefly, and then you go do it again, and now you're clean, and you're like, well, I'm just gonna go. That feels like a choice to me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, you guys. Some of these questions can be a little heavy, and I love to hear everybody's different side. Right, let's move on. It says, I believe that mothers who stay in abusive relationships are guilty of child abuse. I'm saying disagrees. Robin, disagree. Disagree. Amy.
Looks like we have some reluctant disagreements.
Yeah.
Everyone's side's going up really
It's
slow.
like which one? All right. Kathy, why do you feel on the edge on that?
I feel on the edge because I know someone personally, a sister that the one I mentioned earlier, she was in an abusive relationship, and she stayed for a while. She didn't think that the children knew what was going on, which was ignorance on her part. Just because they were in a different room doesn't mean they can't hear what's going on. I think initially, she really didn't think, when they were younger, but as they got older, I thought she was guilty of it. We talked to her about it. How can you keep going back to him now that you know that the kids know what's going on? So I think I think every situation is different, I guess. I think it all depends on the dynamics, I guess, in the home. But overall, I think if the kids know what's going on, and more chances than not, they do know what's going on, then I do think that they are guilty if they're continuing to expose the children to that abuse.
Okay. All right.
Can I jump in and put Amy on the spot? Because I really want to know Amy's take on that.
Okay.
Sorry, Amy. I apologize.
I think it's hard to say agree or disagree on a lot of these because there are so many other variables.
Right.
A mom who stays in the relationship is guilty of child abuse to the extent that the child suffers emotionally. But at the same time, I think a parent's primary obligation is to keep their children safe. And then all the other things come after that, but safety and protecting them has to come first. And so I think she is guilty of child abuse if she stays, but I disagree because sometimes there's no other recourse at that time. And so maybe she's guilty of child abuse, but I don't know if I can explain it right.
I know it's tough. It's like
There,
with my
there,
sister.
there are times when a woman lives isolated, maybe in a place where there isn't a shelter, maybe doesn't have any family that's supportive, and she's doing the best she can.
And Amy, that brings me to a great, I wanted to add to that. You're talking about that the victim doesn't have anywhere to go, doesn't feel supported, and that is part of what the perpetrator wants to make the victim feel. They want to take away those protective factors for that victim. So yes, they do feel like they don't have anywhere to go.
And sometimes they don't. It's not just a feeling. There are people that live where there aren't shelters.
Right, right. I love this conversation with you guys, and I love hearing everybody's views on it. Let's move on to the next one. I believe teen parents cannot do an adequate job. Disagree, disagree, disagree. Okay.
It's unanimous.
It is. Pooja, do you want to elaborate on that one?
I mean, as long as the parent is supporting their child, I don't think age is a big factor. You know, as long as they have a job and are doing everything necessary for the child.
Okay. All right. What about Clara? Clara, do you want to elaborate on yours?
Kathy had her hand up as well.
We can't hear you, Clara. We thought we fixed it. Oh no. No. Okay, we'll try again. I'm sorry. Who was it? Heather?
Kathy.
Kathy. Okay, Kathy.
I think again, it all depends on the teen. Some teens are more mature than other teens are, and depends a lot on their life experiences. I don't think it's ever the situation that anybody wants for our teens is for them to be a teen parent, but I think it all just depends on the individual teen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some would be good parents at that, and some it would be a nightmare.
Case by case, right?
Yeah. And the support that they have. I mean, some teens would have good support, and then there are some that don't have any kind of support. So that's a big factor as well.
Right, right.
And a 13-year-old might parent a lot differently than a 19-year-old.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You're right. So the next question is, I believe that a child needs two parents in the home. Disagree, disagree. I think it's unanimous again, disagrees. Peter? What about you, Peter?
I am divorced. I have a child. My ex-wife and I, our primary communication, as it should be, is about what's best for her at all times, and that applies to every aspect of her life. Somebody could say the ideal situation would be two parents in the home, but you also have to look at both parents. There could be a problem where you don't want both of those parents in the home.
Yes. So as we were talking about domestic violence, is it worth having two parents in the home when there's domestic violence? Or is it worth being a one-parent household? And I think that is the last one. We will take a quick brain break just to kind of bring our minds back and relax for a little bit. So I'll see you guys in about 15 seconds. All right, guys, we're back. All right, we are going to move on to culture and understanding the culture. I want to talk a little bit about what culture is before we do a very quick, I guess, activity. It's more like talking about culture. Oh, I'm so sorry. We have a video to show you guys. This is an awesome video too.
Hi there. Hi. Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, I know that. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I knew before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, well, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean. But I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
I'm Chasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
No, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hey, Governor! What's all this then? Dropping the bomb into you? It's now sporty! Double, double, toil and trouble! On the hill, beware Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? Weird? Must be a cramp thing.
What did everybody think about the video? Was it funny? Kind of a little icebreaker, a little funny way to transition us into culture. So culture is a learned pattern of customs and beliefs and behaviors socially acquired and socially transmitted through symbols and widely shared meanings. So culture can be defined as an organized group of learned responses and ready-made solutions to problems people face and how to live a day-to-day life. So culture is also not bound by race and ethnicity, but groups of people who work in certain fields may also develop cultures that they have in that work field. So Ashley and I were talking about it, and we were talking about one of our cultures that we developed is going to eat a Don Mario. And the staff on here can testify that we fulfill that culture very, very religiously. We eat at this Mexican restaurant that is right here downtown, maybe 3 to 5 times a week. And we do it, it's just so good. And one of us, thought about it, say, hey, let's go here and introduce the other one. And then our other coworkers jumped on that, and that became part of our culture. We do that pretty much every day. I want to also talk about culture is like an iceberg. So everybody knows an iceberg, right? So you can only see about 10% of the iceberg, and then the other 90% is underwater. So that 10% that you see is kind of like what you see in culture. So you may see the way they dress, the way they act, the way they talk, but you don't see that other part under the iceberg, which may be like their beliefs and the rules and how they, you know, interact in their home where nobody else sees, you know. So that's also part of culture. And one thing I wanted to talk about in my culture is a tradition that we have, which was when my little kids turned 1, it's a tradition to shave their heads off, because it is known in my culture that if you shave their heads off after or once they turn 1, if, you know, baby hair is done growing, so you shave their head and it gives them that opportunity to have thicker, fuller hair in one length. So I brought this up to my husband, and my son has had his head shaved several times. My husband never said anything because it's my son, and my husband shaves his head and he's like, oh, you're just like daddy. But when I brought this up with my daughter, he was like, please don't shave her head. She has said dark a lot. She has a lot of hair. Don't shave it, please. And we kept going back and forth. And, you know, he made his arguments, I made my arguments, and we did decide to let her keep her hair. Now, I did tell him when she gets older and she starts to complain that she has thin hair, that it's not full, it's not very long, and stuff like that, I will tell her it is your daddy's fault. I would have given you long hair, but that is your daddy's fault. So I wanted to take a minute and for you guys to think about your own culture that you have. A lot of people, Ashley's not coming up. I'm just kidding. She got up and I'm like, oh, I'm used to her coming into the screen and talking.
I'm ready to share too. That was part of the pre-work that you guys had lots of questions about. We're identifying your culture or how you may have been marginalized, and it wasn't something that everyone could identify with. So if you guys are hesitant about sharing what you think is culture, then I was going to share something of mine. But I want you guys to go first if somebody has something to share.
Let us know what your culture is.
But I thought everyone's a little hesitant.
Crickets.
So Alondra shared something about her kids, and I'll share something about mine as well. So we talked about culture being what's on the surface, and I, talk about my kids, and from like my joke in the very first night, because everyone was like, oh, I just want to spend time with my kids. I was like, I want to spend most of my time with my kids, but not every single minute. So you might have made a judgment about the culture in my family and how responsive I am to my kids. So you might not guess that we in our family choose to co-sleep. My husband and I have 4 children, and they are 9, 7, 6, and 2, and they all sleep in the bed with us, and they have since our oldest son was a year old. So that was a decision that we made for our family. It's not something that you can tell by looking at us. Some of you probably are like, oh, that's really sweet. And some of you are probably like, oh my gosh, they're crazy people. That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard of. But either way, it's not something that you can tell by looking at us, or that you wouldn't have known prior to me disclosing that about the culture in my family. But that is just a tiny thing that is part of the culture of our family. It changes every single aspect of our morning and nightly routine that you may not consider. But if you have kids, you know that it would be very different if they were in your bed every night. So now that you have some examples from Alondra's family and from my family, who would like to share a portion of their culture, what they identify as their culture?
Kathy, you're unmuted. Is that on purpose or by accident?
Nope, that was an accident.
Okay. Does nobody wants to raise their hand? Pooja.
So before any of my siblings or I, before we leave the house and we're about to do something like an interview or a big test or going off to college, our parents would always give us a spoon of honey anytime we go out, just to hope that, I guess it symbolizes that okay, good luck, and yeah, it's just something we do.
Yeah. Andrea?
Well, I was gonna say, I'm a nurse, and a lot of the time I'm half Latino, and a lot of the time when I have patients that are Latino, they can recognize that, and I don't speak Spanish. And ever since we started this class, Miss Coke was my French teacher. So whenever I'm in triage sometimes and I'm trying to speak Spanish, from what little I know, I will get all the verbs mixed up with the French stuff because I had French all through middle school and high school. So that became part. I don't speak any Spanish, but I'm half Hispanic, and then the other Hispanics like shame me for it. So it's
It's all right. It's all right. Clara added something into the chat box, and she said something that they used to do in their family was to call manner bites, which I want to know a little bit more about what that is. Clara, would you type what that is maybe? Does anybody else have anything in their culture? No. One other thing that we had in my culture while Clara is typing that is to, when babies are born, they wear something red, and like they wear it all throughout, at least until they're 6 to a year old. So Gracie would wear like this little bracelet. I put it in her leg, and it had a little bead with a little dot in the middle, and that's called ojo malo. So what that symbolizes, or what the red symbolizes, is that it blocks the negativity from other people. So when they're talking about the baby or about that child, it repels that negativity. So it's just something my family, or in my culture, you know, when my daughter, when I was pregnant, another Hispanic lady came to me and said, do you have something red for her yet? And I was like, no, I haven't been able to find anything. She's like, I have something for her. And so it's great to know, you know, that other people that you don't interact with every day and stuff also know your culture. So Clara says something that manner bites is when the kids were young, they had to at least try a bite of new food to decide if they like it or not. We didn't let them get by with saying they don't like something if they had never had to try it. That is amazing. Yeah, we actually do that as well. And the kids hate it. They hate it. They're like, no, I don't want to try it. I don't want to try it. But we do actually make them try like just one bite, just one bite. My son actually licks it. He's like, I licked it. All right. I think that, we're going to go over stereotypes very, very briefly. That video that we watched was a stereotype, you know, kind of assuming what they are and taking that as what is. So make sure that you are always very aware of stereotypes, and that you keep your own bias and your own views in check, and just make sure that you understand the facts before you make assumptions. Okay, and I think we are working on wrapping up for tonight. I'm going to invite Ashley back over here.
Because of our shortness of time, we hope that we covered everything well enough for you. That's why we put so much emphasis on our pre-work, to make sure that you guys get as much information about these topics as we can. As these things come up in your cases, whether it be domestic violence or substance abuse, or working with a family whose culture is very different from yours, we want you guys to feel open to talking with us and bringing any questions that you have back to the staff. Although Alondra and I have led most of the conversations up to this point, we are not the only staff members, and we certainly are not the only ones knowledgeable about these topics. In the next couple of weeks, as we wrap up, we are going to get to hear more from Susan and from Robin as well. So we want you guys to really feel comfortable coming to your supervisor with questions and concerns and discussions about these topics as we go forward. In your pre-work, there is going to, it's less pre-work. I should have warned you that week 4 is like the week that there's a ton of pre-work, and you're past that. So as we come into week 5, there's quite a bit less pre-work. There is a test. It's a pre-test. Next week, Susan is going to really dive into working with older youth and we need to do a pre-test, then we'll have you do a post-test the next week for pre-work. So there are going to be some phrases, some words, some topics that you may not be familiar with. It's perfectly okay. It is just a pre-test. We fully expect that you're not going to know all of those answers. Now, as far as office hours, some of you guys have been checking in and keeping up with office hours as we go through everything, and we love that. We love talking to you guys on Mondays, but we don't want to talk to you on this Monday because it's Labor Day. So we want you to know that if you still want to do office hours, I'm going to pop into that document and change it from Monday to Tuesday. We will still have court and we'll have court observation, so please feel free to check in with Susan and make sure that you're getting that set up before we get to the swearing in. And then if you have any questions and you need to do an office hours, let us know. And if you can't do it on Tuesday and you need to do it tomorrow, or you really, really need us on Monday, then go ahead and shoot us an email or more likely a text, and we'll try to fit that in over the weekend or on Monday too. But just know that we're not going to be intentionally scheduling any on Monday because it is Labor Day. We are right at 8:01 now, so if anybody has any questions, you can ask those to the group, and as always, we'll be sticking around for a few minutes to answer any questions that you have about tonight's discussion or about last week's pre-work or about next week's pre-work. But if you don't have any questions and you're ready to hop off and start the rest of your night, then you are free to go. You have fulfilled all your obligations for tonight. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Hi, Heather. I just got your chat and I love it. You're muted. I can't hear you.